After becoming familiar with Isaiah and Jeremiah, two prophets who spoke at different but connected moments in Israel's history, we now enter the life and mission of Ezekiel, who continues that historical and spiritual thread, but brings it into a dimension both more painful and, at the same time, surprisingly new. Isaiah had foretold what could happen if the people abandoned God, yet he also spoke of a future hope. Jeremiah had personally witnessed the final disaster, trying until the very end to warn the people. Ezekiel, however, belongs to the next phase. He does not speak to a people about to fall, but to a people who have already fallen, who have already lost their land, their city, their temple, their normal life. He is the voice of those living in exile, deportation, and total rupture. This is Travel in History, where every mystery has a story and every story hides a deeper secret. Join us as we explore strange facts, dark legends, and the questions no one dares to ask. If you're curious, brave, and love a good mystery, you're in the right place. Subscribe and let the journey begin. Ezekiel lived in the 6th century BCE during one of the most dramatic periods in Jewish history, the Babylonian invasions and the definitive fall of the Kingdom of Judah. Historical sources and biblical texts place his deportation around 597 BCE, when King Nebuchadnezzar deported not only soldiers and ordinary people, but also prominent figures, priests, artisans, and educated individuals. Among them was Ezekiel. He was still relatively young, probably around 30 years old, a symbolic age because, in the priestly tradition, it was around that age that one could fully enter temple service, Ez 1:1. This makes his story even more powerful. At the very moment he was about to officially become a priest in Jerusalem, his city was conquered, and he was taken away. Not only did he lose his homeland, but he also lost the future he had been preparing his entire life. Ezekiel was not born a professional prophet. Before becoming a prophet, he was a priest, the son of Buzi, linked to the priestly line. He grew up in a deeply religious environment, immersed in liturgy, sacrifices, laws, sacred symbols, and contact with the temple. For him, the temple was not just a building, it was the center of the world, the place where heaven and earth meet. For this reason, the deportation was not only a political tragedy, it was a spiritual earthquake. The people wondered, if the temple has fallen, does it mean that God has abandoned us? And it was in this situation, far from Jerusalem, along the Chebar Canal in Babylon, that Ezekiel received his prophetic calling. His calling is one of the most striking in the entire Bible. The book of Ezekiel recounts a vision of extraordinary power, living creatures with multiple faces, wheels that move in every direction without turning, a kind of celestial chariot, and above all this, the glory of God. Ez 1:4-28. This vision, known as the chariot vision, or Merkavah, became central over time, not only in the Bible, but also in subsequent Jewish tradition. Rabbinical texts, especially in the Talmud, describe how difficult and delicate it was to explain these visions. For centuries, Jewish tradition considered this chapter so profound and spiritually risky that it was taught only to highly prepared individuals. In mystical Jewish traditions, such as those related to Merkavah mysticism, this vision became a gateway for reflecting on the presence and mystery of God. Even in the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered at Qumran, fragments of Ezekiel's book were found, indicating that his voice continued to be studied, meditated upon, and considered essential for centuries afterward. What is striking is that the glory of God appears not in Jerusalem, not in the temple, but in Babylon, in foreign land. This is a decisive point. Through Ezekiel, the idea emerges that God is not tied to a geographic location. He is not confined within the walls of the temple. He can speak, act, comfort, and judge anywhere. For a people accustomed to equating faith with their land and temple, this is a spiritual revolution. And it is precisely here that Ezekiel's mission begins: to guide the people to understand what has happened, and above all, what can still happen. Ez 2:1-10. But being a prophet was never simple, and for Ezekiel it was even more challenging. Like many prophets, he did not choose this life. He was chosen. His task was immense. He had to explain that destruction was not a random historical accident, but the consequence of a profound turning away from God. He had to speak of sin, responsibility, idolatry, and spiritual unfaithfulness. And he had to do so before a people who were suffering, who had lost everything, and who might not want to hear that in part this situation was also the result of their own choices. To make the message even stronger, God asked him to communicate not only with words but also with symbolic, almost theatrical gestures that struck the imagination. Ezekiel had to lie on his side for long periods, Ez 4:4-8, build a kind of model of besieged Jerusalem, Ez 4:1-3, and eat sparingly to represent the people's hunger and hardship, Ez 4:9-17. This was not spectacle, it was prophecy lived through the body. His personal life was deeply affected as well. The Bible recounts that his wife died, and he was commanded not to mourn publicly in the usual way, Ez 24:15-18. This act became a symbol of the grief that would strike Jerusalem, a grief so great that it exceeded even ordinary expressions of mourning. Behind this command, often difficult to comprehend for modern readers, there was a real man with feelings, attachments, and relationships. Ezekiel is not an abstract figure. He is a man who loves, suffers, and struggles between obedience to God and human grief. This makes him deeply relatable, because he is not a superhuman. He is a human being traversed by a mission greater than himself. Yet Ezekiel's message is not only judgment and sorrow. On the contrary, a fundamental part of his prophecy is devoted to hope, reconstruction, and renewal. One of the most famous images is that of the valley of dry bones coming to life, symbolizing a people seemingly spiritually dead, but able to be revived by the Spirit of God. Ezekiel 37:1-14. Towards the end of his book, there is also a long description of a renewed temple, an image of order, harmony, and divine presence filling the life of the people once more. Ez 41:4, Ez 43:1-7. All this shows that Ezekiel is not the prophet of despair, but of responsibility and hope together. Historically, his figure had an enormous impact. His words helped Israel understand that faith could survive exile, that religious identity did not depend solely on a physical place, but on a living relationship with God. In subsequent Jewish and Christian traditions, Ezekiel became a reference point for reflecting on God's presence in history, the meaning of suffering, and spiritual renewal. His visions, symbols, and words continue to be studied, interpreted, and compared with biblical texts and ancient traditions, including intertestamental writings and rabbinical reflections. He is a figure that spans centuries, speaking of fall, but even more of rebirth. Ezekiel is important because he does not merely recount what happened. He opens paths of understanding. He does not close the story with, "It is over," but reopens it with, "It can begin again." He is one of the prophets who most powerfully combines history, faith, suffering, and hope. Seeing him today means not only knowing a biblical character, but entering into one of the deepest experiences of human spirituality, losing everything and discovering that even there, God can still speak, guide, and rebuild. If you know more or have theories, let us know in the comments. We read them all. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to subscribe for more mysteries like this one.